Hiya! Okay, so key area 3 of Unit 1, DNA and the production of proteins. Nice little short one, this one. People tend to like it because of how simple it is. So we'll be looking and kicking off with just a little overview of what we're going to cover in this key area and then start on the first half of it.
Okay, so again, this is from the SQA course specification. This is what we are going to be discussing. This video is going to look specifically at A. There's lots of words. It's actually not that much compared to the other ones.
Oh, no.
Not that much. So this is quite a nice one. So you can pause it and read that if you like.
That's it. I think pretty much all the writing there is all the things that you need.
Yep.
Whereas the other one, woof. Okay, so we'll be looking at the structure of DNA, including the bases. We'll be looking at the function of DNA, and then finally on the second video, how proteins are actually made, the relationship between nucleus, mRNA, and the ribosome.
Okay, so yep, in this video, nice and simple, we're learning about the structure of DNA. That's it. Seems like this is a lot of things you can learning about in this video. It's actually not too much. So we're going to learn where DNA is found, the shape used to describe DNA. We're going to be able to name the 4 DNA bases, describe how the 2 strands of DNA are held together, describe the base pair rule, and state why the order of bases in DNA is important. Now, looks like a lot. It actually really isn't, and this one should be quite nice for you.
Okay, so our DNA is what makes us us, okay? It codes for different traits such as eye color, hair color, a bunch of stuff we don't really understand, including genetic diseases, possibly even some talent-related things. We're not quite sure, but we do know that your DNA controls everything that you look like, unless it's artificially dyed or surgeried, that's your DNA that controls that. It's found in the nucleus of the cell and is necessary for organisms to survive and grow correctly.
Okay, so where's DNA found? You might already know this from S1 and S2. Probably, hopefully most of you do. DNA is found in the nucleus of the cell. We learned it when we talked about cell structure in the very first key area here. So if we look at that picture of our cell up in the corner, and we zoom in the nucleus, and we actually find if we look closer in the nucleus, we have these little cross-shaped things called chromosomes, which are basically lots of DNA compacted together into that shape, which we will discuss about a bit more as we go through various different key areas actually.
Okay, so DNA carries genetic information. Now this is where it gets a little bit weird, okay? DNA is a code. It is a secret code that basically tells proteins how to be built. And those proteins then make our characteristics, like a protein for hair color. So it codes for everything, and it's what makes us similar or different to other organisms. Like, what's the percentage that we share with a banana? Isn't it something like 60% of our DNA we share with a banana?
Yeah, I think it's higher than that. I think it's like 70 or 80%.
Something silly like that. But the idea is that we've got DNA in common with other organisms, but tiny changes to DNA make significant differences. So for example, if you have cystic fibrosis, there's lots of mutations for cystic fibrosis, but cystic fibrosis is a disease that affects the production of mucus in the lungs, and it can affect the immune system as well. And it is created, well, one particular version of it is created by one single mistake in a code in one particular gene on DNA. And that creates all of the effects of cystic fibrosis. So the code is super important, and tiny changes to the code can have massive consequences.
Yeah, there's an example that I really like is the difference between our hair colour, so the difference between brown hair and red hair. There is basically about just under 1,000, it's about 900 and something bases that code for brown hair. If one of them changes to a C, and it's one of somewhere in the 900 and something, it's like 927th one, if it changes from a G to a C, you don't get brown hair, you get red hair. And that's the difference. It's one letter out of trillions and trillions of letters. You go for that big a difference. So one tiny letter can make such a difference. But then all humans are 99.99% similar. But then we're also 99% similar to an orangutan.
Yeah.
So
it's a strange thing. So
it's weird.
This code is amazing and complicated and also simple. It's brilliant.
Okay, so in terms of chromosomes, so chromosomes are those little cross-like structures that we just saw on the last slide. The idea is DNA kind of winds up and it condenses and it piles up and it goes into a cross-shaped structure. Sometimes it's a single one shown here. We will touch on that more in Unit 2, actually, the difference between single and cross-shaped chromosomes. But the idea is on your chromosomes, you have sections called genes, like these ones highlighted here. So it's just a section. It might be a big section, it might be a little section. And the idea is that that is a portion of DNA that codes for a protein. So every so often you'll get a portion of DNA and it will say, right, I am the gene for your eye colour. The next section of DNA, I am the gene for your hair colour, and so on. and they code for the protein that actually causes you to show that trait. And we'll touch on this more when we talk about protein synthesis a bit, but that's what DNA is. It's all about carrying that code for building a protein.
Okay, and obviously, if the code is different, you're going to get it from protein.
Yeah.
Okay.
So this is our random example here, but I really enjoy it for obvious reasons. So this is your 16th chromosome. So all of us have, in all of our cells, we have 23 pairs of chromosomes. And on chromosome 16, here is listed, it's actually a load of diseases that are related to that chromosome. But what's also very noticeable is at the bottom of chromosome 16, actually before I made this point, the bottom of chromosome 16 is actually where you find the gene that is a mutated gene that causes ginger hair, and it happens to be right beside this one that is highlighted, which is UV-induced skin damage, so the vulnerability to this. So basically, it's right beside the gene that causes you to get sunburn, and that is where the mutated ginger gene comes, which has got a lot to do with why I am much more likely to get sunburn than most of the population, because I have this stupidly mutated gene right beside the bit that causes you to get vulnerability to the sun. So great genetic fun for you there, but it's nice to know that there's something interesting in it, and I'm a mutant.
Okay, so let's look at the structure of DNA. DNA is double-stranded. It's two strands, and they are lined up opposite each other, and they twist together in order to form something called a double helix. So that's very important. If they ask you what's the shape of DNA, that is called a double helix. So you see there's one strand running down, it's not a side because they twist, and another strand opposite it, and they twist together, and they form this double helix structure. So very important term there.
Okay, so in terms of the actual structure of the DNA, so within this double helix, there are things called complementary base pairings. So you'll see in this, there are actually only 4 colours on this. There's a purple, a pink, and a green, and a kind of orangey pink. And the idea is the same colours always match. If you look along that DNA strand, green and pink are always together, and the purple and orangey colour are always together. And that's what always happens in DNA, is there are always matching base pairs.
Okay, now what these bases are, what that means is there are 4 DNA bases, okay? They're called adenine, thymine, cytosine, and guanine. Now you must know them by name, but you also have to be familiar that they might be referred to by their letters occasionally. So adenine is sometimes referred to as A. You can never do this, okay? You can never, like if somebody says what name the base that should be here. If you put T, no marks. Thymine, marks. Okay, so always use their full names. You only get permission to use letters if it's very specific about the question. Okay, so the green is representing an adenine base, so we've got adenine bases running down there. The purple representing thymine bases. Now, these bases are very important because number 1, they hold the 2 strands of DNA together with a complementary base pairing relationship. What that means is, and I'll just shrink us down a second, adenine always pairs with thymine. So if I saw an adenine on one strand, I will see a thymine on the other strand. Okay, always, always, always. Guanine pairs with cytosine, which means the same thing. If I see a cytosine on one strand, opposite it, I will always see guanine. Okay, and that's how they pair up together, and that's how they keep the 2 strands of DNA together. By doing this complementary base pairing. So again, exam question, how are the 2 strands held together? Through complementary base pairs.
But what is really important is spelling of these. You have to learn how to spell these perfectly, because thymine, there is a thing called thiamine. It's just got 1 extra letter in it. It's a totally different thing. You have to learn how to spell these ones exactly. It's not the nicest thing, but you have to in biology because there's too many things. Similarly, cytosine, it's really close to a lot of other words, so learn how to spell all of these properly, please.
Yes, a good plan. Okay.
Okay, so touching on that complementary base pair, the idea that they line up in a specific way, this GIF shows it quite nicely. Again, the adenine, so that A is always with the thymine, which is that T, and the C, which is cytosine, is always with that G, which is guanine. And this is crucial. Again, that is what is holding those 2 shapes of DNA together. You have to learn these base pairs. They are not always going to be all labelled. They're not always going to be certain shapes or colours. You need to know this rule so you can work out from any information given what the other bases are.
There's lots of past papers that you can practice with. One strand is shown and you've just got to complete the letters of the other strand or say what bases are at particular locations.
It's pretty nice. It's pretty easy.
Now, the bases that run down one strand, so you've got an A, C, A, C, A, running down one side of the strand, that is really important because that is what controls the order of amino acids in a protein, basically the building blocks of the protein. Okay, now we're going to skirt on this idea. If you do higher human next year, we will look in more depth at this, but you do need to know this idea that the order of the bases controls the order of amino acids in a protein, and the order of amino acids in a protein control the shape and the job of that protein. So different order of bases, different amino acids, different protein. Okay, and you have to get that idea inside your head. Is this code of A's, G's, C's, and T's, that is a code that is spelling out instructions on use this amino acid, then amino acid C, then amino acid D. Okay, and if you change that code, then you're going to end up with a different amino acid in a different place. Okay.
Okay, so to summarise this video on DNA structure, your key terms and descriptions, again, make flashcards of these, best things to do. So chromosome, it is a strand of DNA found in the nucleus.
Okay, a gene, very important definition, comes up in exams, section of a chromosome that codes for one protein.
Okay, DNA, it's that chemical code that is made of a double helix of two strands linked by complementary bases.
Okay, the double helix is the name for the twisted shape of DNA.
The DNA bases are adenine, guanine, cytosine, and thymine.
And the complementary bases are adenine pairing with thymine and guanine pairing with cytosine. Okay, so if you look at that kind of summary, that's not too bad in terms of the amount of information that you have to have. I think the idea of the order of the bases bit, that's more of an A standard kind of question. So if you get the stuff that's on this screen, you should be fine.
Yep. Okay. So finally, things you should be able to do, you should be able to state where DNA is found. It's found in the nucleus, it is in chromosomes, there's genes and all these things. Name the shape that is used to describe
double
DNA. Double helix. Name the 4 DNA bases.
Adenine, thymine, guanine, cytosine.
Describe how the 2 strands of DNA are held together.
Complementary bases.
Describe the base pair rule.
Adenine with thymine, guanine with cytosine.
And state why the order of bases in DNA is important.
Controls the order of amino acids in a protein.
Well
Easy.
done. Get full marks in your exam.
I win.